kind was given hope.
What is Garo? Well, Garo is a Japanese live-action TV series. It is part of the Tokusatsu genre, the special effect genre, like Kamen Rider or Super Sentai or Ultraman. And except unlike those shows, it was not done by one of the big production companies. It's actually owned and produced and directed by Keita Amemiya. So it's really a creator-owned work. And it's a modern-day dark fairy tale, so set in urban city, modern day. And it's this really interesting blend of fantasy and horror that's aimed at an adult audience, as you can see by our image.
Yeah. Yep, warning, this is an 18+ panel. Now you see why. Well, also, do we have the slides on Keita Amemiya, or should I just...
You can go ahead over here.
Yeah, okay, so like we mentioned, it's creator-owned. Keita Amemiya is a relatively famous, he is both a pen and paper artist and a suit artist. He also writes and directs, is just a really big in the Tokusatsu industry. He got to start doing like suits for things like Kamen Rider Black. He also did a lot of work on various Super Sentai and Metal Hero shows. He actually also did a lot of writing and directing for a few of the Metal Hero and a few of the Sentai, or the Super Sentai.
And the Kamen Rider movies.
Oh yes, the Kamen Rider movies during the 90s bridge. He's also really well known over here for a series of movies called Iria and Zeiram are the big titles there.
He's also done design work for some of the Shin Megami.
Well,
Yeah, for the fourth
just
Shin
for
Megami
Shin Megami
Tensei game, yeah, he was brought in to do designs. He's done a lot of design work for video games. Yeah, really interesting guy. And
as we'll see, the reason his design work is so sought out is because he has this really interesting art aesthetic. Very detailed, very eerie.
yeah.
So let's take a dive into the world of Garo. Just kind of a basic introduction here. As many of you know, since it sounds like a lot of you have seen at least a little bit of the show, there are horrors. These creatures made of the negative side of humanity, sort of the dark karma or the yin of the yin yang sort of concept in Taoism. And they manifest into our world through gates or objects that hold a lot of that dark karma. And they actually originate in a spiritual world called the Makai, and then the gates let them manifest, and when they manifest, they possess whoever it is resonates with that dark energy in really creepy, rapey kind of ways. And then they masquerade as that human for a while and lure people in and eat them. So that is sort of our monster of the week type of creature.
You'll hear the term Inga used quite frequently. That's the Japanese term for this negative energy.
Negative karma.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting seeing the different ways people are possessed. Some of the people who are possessed are dark enough on their own that they more merge with the horror, whereas others, pretty much the horror exploits their flaw and destroys the human via their flaw. So it's a very varied
Lots of
idea.
different enemies because every person is unique.
Now the world they come from is the Makai, and it's not just full of horrors, it's full of pretty much everything. It's the supernatural world, it's got things that are beautiful, fantastical, awe-inspiring, and very dangerous. It's varied, it's got some really neat visuals going on, and this is where the horrors are until the gate appears. They're one of the most dangerous parts of the Makai, though certainly there's a lot of other things that can kill you.
Some portions of the Makai are much closer to the human world. The horrors are very close to us because they feed off of things going on in the human world that produce that Inga. The Makai really reminds me of, in mythology, the concept of the world of fairy, where you have things that are reflections of our world, but as you press on further, you get into more of the dream states and things that are very bizarre and fantastical.
And And then we have the Makai Knights, obviously, who take their name from the Makai. They are human, as far as we know, and they protect humanity from the horrors and other Makai threats. It is a hereditary title, and it is restricted purely to the men.
Yes, it's father to son.
What does
Hereditary, that's usually the title is passed on within a family line, father to son.
It can be passed on to an adopted member of the family, so it's not just tied to the bloodline. But generally that's how it works. A parent passes it down to a child. And the knights each have their own set of armor. Like each family has a particular set with a certain title to it. So the titular Garo is the golden armor. And the golden armor really has its own reputation as being more formidable and powerful, and it really has a weight to bear in terms of their societies.
If you are Garo, you have to be worthy of
Yeah,
the Garo title.
Yep.
And Scar.
But they're interesting armor. They're all
The character in the third season didn't seem to be related to Saejima and the gang.
We'll talk about the third
Because
season in a
actually,
little bit.
I think season 4 might answer my question.
I hope so.
I've got, if you've seen recent
I hope so
episodes,
too.
Yeah.
I've got theories.
Yeah, but it's
Doesn't, again, we'll get to it when we
We'll
get
get to
there.
season 3 when we get to
But
season 3.
it's a very interesting season.
so they're wolf-themed armor. They come with some interesting quirks, like most of the time, this isn't always consistent, a timer where they can't stay in their armored up form for too long because if the timer runs out.
yeah, 999 seconds and the
99.9.
99, yeah.
99.9 seconds, and if you go over, bad things happen, and you do get to see what happens if you go over.
Yeah, they've even got like a little ticking clock motif in their belts or somewhere on their armor too.
And the activities of the Makai Knights are overseen by beings called watchdogs that give them their orders and make sure that they're following the rules, etc.
And they are definitely something supernatural and something of the Makai, but generally probably benevolent, I think.
The Makai priests are another class of people. They are the magicians who perform a parallel or support role for the knights. This is not restricted to just men, so there's a lot of awesome female priests that we run across. They don't have the armor, but they do have a huge variety of magics that they can use. They can either use their magic for direct combat, and you learn throughout the series that the priest actually used to be the mainstay force against the horrors, and eventually it got to be too much, and then they created the knights. So there is some clash between the two classes as to what place each should have.
There's a bit of politicking going on in later seasons.
It's very interesting. The priests are based a lot in Shinto mythology, but also pull a lot from Onmyoji, which is a form of it drew from Chinese mysticism and astrology and astronomy.
It had a big magic component to
Yeah.
it.
They're essentially the Heian era sorcerers, and writing is a very powerful focus you see used quite a bit. You'll get large brushes, and every priest has a brush, and painting is a very powerful way of using magic. They also make objects. You'll get Makai rings and other magical items that assist the knights, but those are usually made by priests. And the armor,
Dogs.
yeah, the armor was likely made by priests too.
We mentioned the watchdogs before. They're part of the power structure of that whole Makai Knight priest system. The watchdogs are more local. There's watchdogs for each area, and they oversee the knights in that area, and then they seem to answer to a more overarching organization that's called the Senate that hands down the decisions. A lot of the stuff with them is still kind of nebulous. It hasn't really been defined other than we've seen them in action.
The series is much more interested in showing you the world rather than explaining it to you. So you constantly get bits and pieces of the world building introduced as we encounter it, frequently when we're following a non-powered character.
So moving into the very first series was just called Garo, and a quick synopsis is a struggling young artist named Garo meets an eccentric and stoic warrior named Saejima Koga. And he's a man who has spent his entire life fighting the horrors using the golden suit of armor Garo. And to get into them a bit more, Kaoru is troubled but hopeful. She's pretty upbeat, but she's trying to make a living and find her big break. She also seems to have some psychological trauma. It's shown that she actually encountered some horrors and Garo when she was a child, and her father made a picture book based around that particular experience. And we see her visiting her psychiatrist even in the first few episodes, so it's that definitely has still had an impact on her. And that storybook from her father is a very powerful memento that she carries with her through the series. But in the first episode, she witnesses Koga fighting, gets splashed by the blood of the horror that he's killing, and when a human gets hit with horror blood, it dooms them to die an awful death in 100 days, and it also draws more horrors to her. He's actually commanded to kill her. That's supposed to be his duty, and it's supposed to be a mercy to her, but he can't bring himself to do that, and that becomes a big crux of the first series.
And another really interesting thing about Kaoru is she is the character that Keita Amamiya, the creator and writer, sees himself most as. She's the one that he wants the audience to empathize with and follow. He very much sees her as the protagonist.
Koga, he's our warrior. He's the latest of the Saejima family, which is the family that during this timeline holds the title of Garo. He's the current Garo, and he was badly socialized as a child. It's a very important part of his character that his father died when he was young. He was actually present for that. And he was raised solely by the family's butler, who, while he was a sweet man, doesn't seem to have done a very good job at teaching Koga how to interact with normal society.
And the next season gets a bit more into his childhood and a bit more into why he's so poorly socialized.
So he's very interesting, and I really like his actor because the actor does a very good job with subtle emotions. Like, Koga does not have very wild or expressive emotions, but just little subtle shifts in his face can say a lot.
Yeah, it's very easy to miss his acting and you see him as just being wooden, but if you really pay attention to the actor, it can be very powerful. It's just very subtle.
And a lot of the interesting characterization just comes between the interaction between Koga and Kaoru, because, she's a normal girl, and he doesn't really know how to be a normal person. So there's certain parts where, like, he gives her a ring that will help him keep track of where she is, because he's letting her live because he can't bring himself to kill her, but he's justifying it to himself as, well, she'll attract the horrors to her, so I can use that to find them quicker. So he gives her a ring to keep track of her and help protect her. When he gives it to her, she's just like, why are you giving me a ring, dude? I'm not gonna marry you. I don't even know you. And he's like,
sudden.
what are you talking about? Like, he has no idea the connotations behind that.
My ring just coughed up a little baby ring for me to put on you.
Yeah. The ring he gives her was actually vomited up by his own talking ring. So it makes it a little eerier. But,
I love Zaruba.
I
love him so much.
Zaruba is a living magical ring created by Koga's priest mentor, and he is very much the series mascot, and he's Koga's companion. Koga talks with Zaruba a lot.
more than he talks with himself.
Especially because when he's confused, and Zaruba isn't always the best at helping him figure out what's going on.
Zaruba's interesting because he's definitely a protagonist, he's definitely an ally, he's definitely a friend to Koga. I mean, the name Zaruba actually means friend in the Makai language, but he's also a very human perspective on the whole thing.
He is a very alien spirit. He is a Makai creature bound into a ring.
Ray.
Ray is the secondary character, and I'll let you go. You love Ray.
I
Yeah.
do love Ray.
She usually cosplays as Ray when we give this panel,
But I've already done 2 costume changes today, so. Ray was the adopted son of the Silver Fang armor line, and he's got a very tragic past that leads him and Koga to butt heads quite a bit. And
By butt heads, she means assassination.
I mean, he attempts to assassinate Koga the first time he sees him.
yeah.
But over time, you get to learn more about Ray. He's much younger and
also,
pricklier. Manages to be both darker and more friendly than Koga at the same time.
and his first introduction is kind of creepy
Yeah.
because he kind of comes across as molesting Garo. But-
He's very much being cruel to Kaoru to be
To get
cruel
to
to
Koga.
Koga, which
Yeah.
doesn't excuse anything he does to Kaoru.
Yeah.
The things he does to Kaoru are terrible. The fact that he knows it's terrible, it stays with him after he is verbally abusing her and scaring the hell out of her, and he just looks absolutely disgusted with himself. He's a very complex character.
Yeah.
And he actually gives himself the name Zero. He abandons his name and the name of the armor. He just wants to be Zero. He wants to be nothing.
Yeah, Ray is a word for zero in Japanese too.
It's interesting because, as we say in the line there, he's on the outside. He seems a lot more friendly and a lot more well-adjusted than Koga. It's kind of an act, but he's better at pretending to be a normal person and
Yeah.
joking with people. He actually smiles, but he's also at heart a much darker character, and he often gets much darker little
Storylines.
subplots.
Yeah, usually the Ray-centric episodes will have you crying at the end.
Jabi is also amazing. Jabi is one of the priests. She's the apprentice of Koga's friend and mentor, and she's very strong in her own right. She can come across as rather severe. She knows what she wants, and she's gonna get it.
Yeah.
And
And she
she
fights on par with the
fights
men.
on par with the
It's
knight.
It's
She's
like some
amazing.
Record Knights, well, you know,
not being an armor.
not wearing armor, yeah.
Um,
Armor. I love everybody in the show,
so
though.
the tone of the first series really has a greater emphasis on horror than some of the later series do, and it experiments with different genres of horror. We have a joke just amongst us that when you watch an episode, you can kind of tell what sort of horror movie Amemiya was watching the night before he wrote the episode.
Yeah, she really likes to play with deconstructing genre.
This was
And it can be very campy sometimes. There's a fight where Koga and Ray are falling down from a skyscraper, and it just keeps they just keep going and going and going.
That 99.9 seconds lasts about 6 minutes, and that skyscraper had to have been about 900 stories tall.
It may have been an orbital elevator, you know. The universe will occasionally wrap just to accommodate set pieces.
So there can be a lot of stretching of physics and reality for the sake of this looks awesome.
It plays by rule of cool a lot.
Fortunately, the story characterization is never abused in that way, but you'll have to suspend your disbelief for fight scenes that don't make logical sense, but make my eyes think this is the greatest thing ever sense.
And the visual aesthetic is gorgeous. The creature design is gorgeous. There's a lot of practical suit and creature work that's so intricate and so very creepy. It's really wonderful. And it's interesting because it's pretty episodic. I mean, there is an overarching plot that develops, and you get a lot more of the character development and the background of the characters, but each episode can be a very different tone from the next.
Yeah.
So there's some that are really good, and there's some that are not as good, but on the whole,
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, for the season, it did start out with a very low budget, so actually the film quality that's filmed on is much more of what we would think of as a soap opera quality. That can be jarring to some people, but they make it work. It's best they can.
Since we keep talking about the aesthetic, if any of you haven't seen it yet, this is what you can expect for the visual style. This is Keita Amamiya. This is what he does.
So the man works a lot in heavy brush strokes and lots of very Sumie style line work. And it translates very well into a lot of the suits. They'll have these really interesting sort of areas of shadow and light just with the way they're sculpted that kind of mirror the brush strokes of his designs. And then he'll just have these designs floating around, and he likes to push how far he can go with the suits and then mixing in CG to do the things that he can never do practically.
There's sometimes where Koga goes into strange worlds like this that are just a lot of the floating calligraphy characters, which really emphasizes the style and is just bizarre because everything is shifting and rearranging. And here you can see, how he works with mechanical stuff sometimes, with just these crazy, eerie, intricate machines. And then sometimes he goes for a bit more mystical, where you have the godlike, with the halo behind her, and artistic movies, which he likes.
Yeah. He's also very fond of a lot of traditional Japanese imagery. A lot of his creatures will also involve things like no mask style imagery.
He really likes this porcelain texture
Yeah.
that he uses on a lot of his
He'll
monsters.
really juxtapose like a porcelain face with a lot of very creepy, very alien black texture.
So the first series was followed by a movie, Beast of the White Knight, and if you watch the first series, that was weird.
Does it have a light sensor? Sometimes they have a light, motion
Well,
sensor.
whatever.
It's whatever.
That's
Or
okay.
it works.
Who would like me
Nice
to
to see you guys.
There's a horror behind you. If you watch the first series, I highly recommend watching Beast of the White Knight because it is an epilogue, and the only thing that really bothered me about the first series is fixed in Beast of the White Knight.
Yeah.
And I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, spoilers are something we try to
We
avoid.
might be spoiling it later on just because we have to. But basically, Koga's going on a rescue mission into the other world, and it introduces a new knight, and it's just a wonderful wrap-up with a movie budget. It introduces Tsubasa, who has the white knight armor. He's very proud and traditional and set in his ways and like the pride of his family name. And he's also very focused on protecting his little sister as his big motivation.
His little sister is a priestess in training, and he's also a priest, too.
Yes.
And he's essentially the guardian for this village of priests that are very independent from normal human society.
And then the second movie was Red Requiem. This is a good intermediary because it brings in some characters that become important in season 2 and onward. So again, it has Koga, but its main focus is on a Makai priest named Rekka. She's the daughter of a knight, and her driving issue is that she couldn't become a knight herself. She wanted to follow in her father's footsteps, and that was denied to her because she's female.
Even though she has the will, the power, and the talent, she cannot be a knight.
So she's a priest, but she takes on male speech and a lot of male inflections that kind of reflect that struggle within herself. And she meets Koga, and the two of them have to work together.
Yes, knights are back.
The two of them have to work together to battle a horror threat.
Yep.
But she is a character who recurs later. She's another really awesome female character.
Yeah.
And I personally find the tragedy of her story really compelling. It's awful that she couldn't be a knight,
Yeah.
and that there's that.
And it's nifty in a genre that's frequently rife with chauvinism to have this be a thing that's being addressed and have strong female characters who are treated equal to the male characters.
So before we dig into series 2, I did forget a slide.
Yeah.
There was another movie, or is it a movie?
It was an OVA.
Yeah, it was straight to video, very short.
That tells the story of the villain of season 1. It's very interesting, it's very artistic. It's almost a little jarring and not quite what you were expecting, at least for us it was. And it has some fascinating points. It does a lot actually animated.
Very experimental with the art style.
Yeah, you'll frequently have the lead character live action, but everything he's interacting with is animated and
In very much
very-
that like ink painting
Yeah, black
Amemiya
and
style. One really cool part of it is one of the main sources of narration is a female character who the actress and the character are completely bilingual in Japanese and English. So she's speaking Japanese for a bunch of it, and then it goes into a sequence where she's speaking just perfect English. And then she goes back to speaking Japanese, and I was very impressed. It stuck with me.
And it's also interesting because it's bookended with more complete live action, but it's staged as though it were a theatrical stage play. And that's impressive, but yeah, it's a kind of a black sheep in the franchise.
Then Amamiya managed to scrape together enough money to do a second full series of Garo.
A few years later.
It was called, and that's pretty much how this franchise has gone, is he does something, it's pretty cool, and then he has to wait until he can build up funds again to do something else. But Makai Senki was the continuing adventures of Koga and Kaoru, and it's much broader in scope than the original series was.
Yeah, spoiler, Kaoru doesn't die.
You get to see a lot more of the Makai and of the Knight's world.
Yeah, the
and
budget is
there's
higher.
The budget is higher. The budget.
It really fleshes out their world building and their society and just brings a lot into the world than they had had before.
Yeah, significantly less episodic and more of a continuous plot.
A new character it brings in is Leo, or Leo, I'm not sure how
Leo.
it's best to
Leo is-
pronounce
Leo,
it.
Leo.
He's a priest who becomes friends with Koga and Kaoru. He's a very gentle personality, and he does a lot with the crafting, creation side of the priest magic. He makes these little mechanical dog creatures fueled by Makai energy.
He and Kaoru have an episode that's pretty much them just wandering around, seeing the amazing things that are out there in the world
Yeah.
that normal human
A
people
lot of Garo has the dark and the horror of that. There's this episode where Leo and Kaoru, I forget what their goal was.
Replenish
They have to
health.
Right. And they go on this trip through the city, just,
Yeah,
the
the normal
normal
city.
world city. But it's almost like, when you're a kid and there's rules for the different areas and things you have to be careful of and don't step here, don't do that, except it's real and they can encounter all kinds of just strange creatures that aren't evil and aren't good and are just there, And
It's very, very
you have to walk around the park this way and there's all
And then
kinds
these
of
random
really
interesting
interesting.
experience of just these things that look like children wearing masks and
It really broadens out just the feel of the world that there's so much more out there, and it's very neat. Gajari. I don't even know where to start on Gajari.
we can't talk about him too much because plot spoilers.
Basically what we have written there.
But he's there and he plays a part and he looks cool when we get to see him.
He's this really weird creature that is... He seems to have some kind of alliance or accord with the knights. Koga goes and speaks with him a few times, and he's very powerful and very strange. And it's never really defined, at least not in this season, where he comes from or why. But we do know that it's considered very dangerous to bargain with him. So he's just sort of like this another force that exists. It's very fascinating.
Very alien and godlike.
As far as I remember from the movie that comes right after
Yeah.
that, it says that he's the reason we have the Knights, because
Yeah.
we have big burden.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the Night Power too is also a double-edged sword that comes up. And part of the wolf motif may be I mentioned with the rings and other stuff that they also involve Makai spirits, and the armors are also in some ways alive too.
So the tone of the second season, it's much more polished and a cohesive whole than the first season. It more just tells a solid story rather than quite as episodic as the first was. It's not quite as silly over the top, but it's still amazing over the top.
It's still Tokusatsu.
If you love just crazy, oh my god, that's so awesome
Amazing
action,
set
it will
pieces.
deliver. But the effects are much better at this point. And the visuals are great. The designs are, I mean, they top what he had in the first season. And it's interesting because it alternates between episodes that focus on Koga and episodes that focus on Rei. With Rei is always being a lot sadder.
Yeah, he's the man who ports
Short
tragedy.
end of the stick a lot.
And
And it's got a very epic
Oh, yeah.
finale. It's amazing. Like, I think that CGI people must have had a heart attack when Amamiya came in with his idea for the finale.
Yeah.
You want us
He wants
to do what?
because you can kind of see that he went way over budget, because at the end there are some issues with we can't build enough suits for this, so we had to rely a lot more on CG right toward the end. And it really works to get the idea across, but not as pretty.
There's something that has always made me laugh. Some of the knights or priests look very ghetto and some look very epic, depending on how important they are.
Yeah.
Some priests look like a homeless person on the street.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure Amamiya designs these really intricate costumes for everyone, and then his poor designers have to like figure out what's actually feasible.
Like, he'll make the main cast stuff and he's very hands-on, but you can only make so much when you're one person.
Like we said, the second season really widens the world of Garo, brings in a lot more creatures other than just the horrors, much grander in scope and visual scale, and you get a lot more history on the knights and the priests. So,
This is where the politics between them actually starts to really come into.
it's fun. It is a lot of fun.
Okay,
Speaking
so
of fun,
there was another movie that was released in just like a year after Makai Senki, and it was called the Togen Flute. And it's a movie that stars Jabi and Rekka, and it's basically just giving the ladies, giving these awesome priests a chance to have their own movie and be protagonists without any sort of compromise to it. And it's debatably, like, as much as I think that the film after it is a better film, it's debatably my favorite film in the franchise. It characterizes them so well, and
They have
it
this
has
great buddy
incredible action scenes, and
We also like to call it Legs, the movie.
yes.
Everybody has very short, leg-freeing costumes.
Gotta fight somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Well,
it's-
they fight with their legs a lot.
It's just a joy to watch, and you can tell that the actors are having a great time doing
Oh,
it,
yeah.
and I just can't recommend this movie highly enough.
and that's one thing. Amamiya, when he asks these guys to come back, they come back. He's got to make it a great place to work because pretty much no one ever turns him down. They're like, "You want me to reprise my role from 5 years ago? Sure, just tell me when to be there."
You want me to be an extra in this scene? Yeah, I'll do it.
There are some shows where this character played one character in a throwaway episode 5 years ago, and he comes back and becomes a recurring character who's completely different. Later on, it can be disconcerting.
Wonderland.
So,
Yes.
the fourth movie, Sokoku no Maru, it's the epilogue to Koga's story. It's the epilogue to season 2, and it really wraps up the story of Koga. It does tie up some loose ends from season 2, kind of like how Beast of the White Knight did with season 1. We like to call it Koga in Wonderland.
Yeah.
It's a fantastical, bizarre romp through the Makai. The entire movie is Koga in the Makai world. And
In the depths of the weirder parts of it, very far away from humanity.
And it's got all kinds of. I have a slide coming up that's just like some of the examples of the visuals and creatures from it, but it is an interesting tone shift from the rest of the series. It's kind of like gritty urban horror, and this is just so fantastical and awesome. But basically, Koga had a bargain that he made with Gajari, and to fulfill it, he has to travel to the far reaches of the Makai, and it's poignant, it's fun, it's just visually stunning, and
It has one of the Gaim actors.
Yeah,
If you
it's
are.
got,
Yeah. With a lot of this stuff, you recognize you'll recognize characters in one franchise, play characters in another franchise. Yeah.
That's
So,
as well.
so I mean, this gives you an idea just of some of the crazy like set pieces and CG work, and also just some of the creatures. There's a weird little dwarf thing there. There's this plushy thing that's kind of terrifying. And this guy here, he also plays Takatora in Gaim, but when we watched this movie, we were calling him the Japanese Johnny Depp, because that's sort of the feeling he gets across.
Yes, and he is playing a scarecrow character, so
He's flamboyant as hell.
And
yes.
it's really amazing the budget Amamiya managed to string
yeah.
together. Like, you will walk by sets that are as intricate as this, and that's all Koga does, is he walks by this place and you're like, I want to see more of that.
Yeah,
Can
that's
we
why
go
I was
back?
like, why is that wall watching him walk by with a million eyes?
So
cares? Because it's a wall.
it's a wonderful.
Doesn't your wall
it's
watch you?
fun. It's the send off that Koga and his story deserve.
Absolutely.
It is.
It's beautiful. All right, let's talk about season 3. Season 3 is a little controversial.
Yeah.
It's very different from the earlier series. It's the first Garo production that Amamiya didn't personally oversee pretty much everything. He didn't do the writing and the direction and the producing. So it's got a very different feel to it. It's an entirely new cast than all of the Garo stuff that had come before, and it's in a new time period that no one's quite sure where this time period fits in. Was this before the other Garo stuff? Is this after? Is this possibly a parallel world? We're not sure.
It's also set in this weird city that seems to be much higher tech than like our normal modern world. But it's really hard to say where it could slot in.
And basically we have a new young knight who has broken Garo armor. The Garo armor is not golden
It
anymore.
has become tarnished and we don't know
And
why.
he ends up in Bull City, this strange futuristic utopia that
Never trust the word
he's
utopia.
got to save.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely not.
Pretty much from the moment you walk into Bull City, you're like, evil are dystopian.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Those beautiful singing statues and the floating news billboards and yeah, it's like a much prettier Blade Runner world.
Yeah. Introduces a new type of horror. As opposed to the standard horrors, the model horrors are tougher than their standard brethren. They are more intelligent. They are much more a possession of the host that retains all of the memories and experiences and can come up with very intricate and horrifying schemes.
They're terrifying because they don't rely on the Inga or the dark karma. Like usually with horrors, there's got to be some darkness going on in order for the horror to possess you. That's not the case here, and it can be forced on you. It can be planted in you, and you never even know it's there until it awakens, and all of a sudden you're a monster.
Yeah. It's,
And they are also undetectable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very different, very scary.
Dude, plastics.
This was our new protagonist, a young, strong-willed, surly, independent, and a rather bitter young knight.
But he's very sweet around normal civilian people.
Yeah.
Like there are scenes with him just going out in the park and playing chess with elderly park goers.
Yeah, Ryuga's problems are actually with the knights and the priests in the world that they represent, not with humanity. He's very gung-ho about defending people.
He
so
loves
it's-
people.
Some
You guys
Tokusatsu
like
fans.
to recognize this guy.
Yeah.
Hot-headed, gregarious playboy. You see more of him in
That
his
is hilarious.
introduction than you probably have
Nice
to
talking.
see.
We're talking about the Gokaiger here.
But Takura is a pretty good guy. When there's trouble, he will jump in to try to keep his clan.
Yeah.
Might also recognize this
Yeah,
guy.
some gun fans.
Yeah, so Akari was unfortunately given the short end of the stick as far as the series goes. He gets the least amount of character development. He is introduced to us as our bull-wielding knight, glasses-wearing dude. And he kind of is just
That's
that
what he
trope.
does.
That's what he does.
It's one that, this is the thing that really bugged me about the series because the other two knights got a lot more characterization and
It feels like there must have been some supplemental material material, and I'm not sure if there actually was, but it really feels like he's got a backstory somewhere
And
that
I-
we just never got.
I really feel like this actor was wasted after now seeing him as Ryola.
Yes.
This actor is amazing, but he wasn't given quite as much to do as Audrey as I would have liked.
Rian,
Neon's pretty awesome.
I love her.
a young Makai priest, the adopted daughter of the older priest who oversees and directs their little group. She's smart, sassy, and she's the magician for.
And she is so steampunk, and
She's so steampunk.
she makes these bullets for this magical revolver, and it's just awesome. And we can't talk too much because plots.
But she is actually a cop, and she's a good cop in
Good
the
cop in a
police
bad
force.
city.
And she's initially hunting the knights because, so far as she knows, they are running around slaughtering innocent people.
Yeah, they think they're terrorists.
And then she starts to figure things out, and it's her arc is really interesting.
Yeah.
We actually have a set human villain group, and they are also one of the better parts of the series.
Yes.
The Kanashiro family is the family that runs the city. They are the primary antagonists, and there's a lot of political intrigue with them.
That's about all we can say about them.
Because
Yeah.
otherwise, spoilers.
Spoilers!
So the tone of the third season, again, it's kind of more a dystopian in this fictional city, and it very much stands alone from the rest of Garo. It's interesting because there's things from original Garo that it doesn't so much pull in, like it doesn't have the timer.
Yeah. Very
It has a much younger cast, and just the characters have a much younger feel to them.
The characters themselves are shown as being much more immature. There's a lot more infighting and posturing.
And sadly, there's a lot less practical effects and practical suit work.
They didn't have the budget to make new suits for
Sorry, I'm
this
making
series.
a comment.
okay.
I did enjoy a lot the fights without suits in that show. Though.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
They were great.
the
Yes.
CGI team really didn't know how to manage their camera work around the CGI characters, so it's very stilted.
But when they did have out-of-suit fights, it was
Yeah,
good.
the wire work for the man-to-man fights were fantastic.
Yes.
I do want to say for this season, even though it's a bit apart from the rest of Garo, it was a very solid and
Yes.
interesting plot. I will say that.
It
for
was very well written,
And
very tightly
it's
written.
it is extremely well done, well thoughted show. It's very different in feel.
It's got a very
Yeah.
different feel, and it is much more plot focused than character focused.
So it's
where
well worth it. It's
It's just
different.
And just so you know, this PowerPoint is a little out of date because when we submitted it, the Black Blood
Black
wasn't
Blood.
finished yet, and
Mackay Flower
Mackay
hadn't
Flower
started
hadn't
yet.
started.
Yeah, we had to submit this back in April
So-
1st. Yeah.
So there was just recently a new mini-series. It was 6 episodes. It starred Ray Zero, and
And we got a new suit too.
we did get a new suit.
Zero has evolved. It was very cool.
Interesting, but it was another case of Amemiya wasn't directly at the wheel, and you could kind of tell. I have to say, I love the villain from this.
Yes.
I love the actor that played the villain. The actor is actually not Japanese at all, and he just had a great stage presence for a villain. I mean,
Yeah.
he just chewed the scenery.
I was extremely happy that they brought that actor back.
Yeah, he has actually the Mackay Flower too.
Completely different character. But
This was good. It wasn't as solid as maybe I would like it to be, but it was certainly worth the watch.
It wasn't really Zero's story.
It wasn't.
It needed to either be shorter or longer.
It was
a
awkward
little bit
length.
wibbly, but
But it had a very interesting concept of a horror that was trying to create a society where humans and horrors could live in peace, where the humans would just occasionally sacrifice one or two to the horrors to eat and then otherwise be left alone.
one human every month. You know, it's so much more efficient, and you end up with far fewer people dying. And look, we can live happily together. Why are you being so greedy about, giving up your life for the good of everybody?
So it was fascinating. That group had a bit of a cold feel to it.
Yeah, exactly.
As we said, it was unfortunately not quite so much Rey's story. It focused much more on a female protagonist that they brought in for the story. And it was more her story with Rey along for the ride.
Yeah.
It wasn't bad by any means, but it didn't shine quite as
Yeah.
brightly as some of the other.
It would have been a bit stronger if it had just been her story, because she was constantly, since it's Zero, she had to stop and be moved over so that Rey could then
That
go
was
in and
tough.
kill the monsters and be awesome. And that was. It's a
But that's
fascinating
okay,
thing.
because now we have Makai Flower, Makano Helma. It's Amamiya back at the wheel for a full Garo series.
This might end up being the best
It's
season.
been
This might end up being
amazing.
the best season.
Spoiler warning, the main character is the son of Koga Garo. And he has taken up the mantle of Garo, and this actor is incredible. Every time we watch an episode, we're like, oh my god, he just did that little chin tilt thing like Koga did, he looks just like his dad. Or, oh my god, that little smile, he looks just like his mom. And I don't know how this actor does that, but I'm just like, you actually look like their son. How
It's creepy how well he manages it. It's just like.
The directing for him must be amazing,
Oh, yeah.
because he'll bring in things from Koga, from Kaoru. Sometimes it looks like he's bringing in little mannerisms from Rei or Tsubasa or Yabi or Rekka, and it's like, I want to see you
Your
as a
childhood.
little one. Can I see your childhood? But it's a good jumping on place.
Oh, yeah.
It's a brand new cast, but very much feels like Garo, and
It's been so satisfying, at least for us. It's every
Every
single episode, the ending
episode,
episode,
we're
we're just like, that was amazing.
Next episode now, please.
And there's been some really dark stuff. There's been some really fun stuff. Like there was an episode where the horror possessed a film movie buff, like old film, old horror film.
Classic film
And,
aficionado.
He would take his victims into the old black and white horror film, like zombie flicks, and it ended up being this like interesting commentary on the evolution of horror films.
And the construction of the horror genre, and looking at how different people interpret it.
Also,
Safety.
Guns is gonna live forever.
I'm starting to wonder whether or not Gonza is actually a Makai item rather than actually just being a
because
butler.
so far he's raised Koga, he's raised
Raiga.
Raiga.
And I mean, he was around when, we don't know how long he was buttling for
an adult
Taiga.
when he took over Koga's childhood, so Gons is gonna live forever, and I'm okay with this.
He's got some like immortality on his side or something.
Really, I don't mind you being immortal Alfred.
He is elf.
But yeah, if you like Garo, this series here, this new one, it's got it all.
Yeah.
And I am greatly looking forward to where they go from here. And it's just really
Yes, there's
strange
going to be
how
an anime coming out as
Yes.
well. So
Right.
I think that's
Amamiya,
the next slide.
Amamiya has
No.
ended up with a lot of money apparently, because we're getting all the Garo out, and I'm okay with
he
that.
needs money.
It's okay.
He needs to make more Garo.
I think the only person writing the anime that's been tapped is
It's Kobayashi.
Kobayashi,
Yeah, it is.
who's a big name for a lot of stuff in the Tokusatsu genre, but she also did the adaptation for Attack on Titan, so
So yeah,
Lots of
Garo,
effort.
it's fun and it's nice to have a very different Toku franchise that's creator owned. It doesn't have all the restrictions that
it's not trying to
Toei
market
or
towards
Tsuburaya. Not that Tsuburaya tends to put a ton of restrictions anyways, they make good stuff.
Well, it's
It just doesn't
restricted
make
by
money.
age limit.
Yeah.
And that's not to say there isn't good Garo merch. In fact, I found a Baron and
Oh,
a
yeah.
Makai Kato Garo in the dealer's room today. So
I have to tell a funny story. Along with Beast of the White Knight, the version that we downloaded of it also had a subtitled behind the scenes, which was brilliant. It was so much fun to watch because the actors just looked like they were having such a great time.
Oh, yeah.
But there was this, I mean, it was filmed in summer, and there was this moment when
At night.
one of the lights at night in their lot had this enormous swarm of some kind of insect. Like
I think
moths,
so many. And the actor that plays Koga was afraid of them. So he sees them, he's like, oh god! And then the actor who plays Ray was like, The Great Garo, ladies and
Yeah.
gentlemen.
The guy who plays Ray is half Japanese, half French, and he's actually French bilingual. Yeah.
His name's actually Ray, too.
Yeah, that's very big. Yeah, R-A-Y.
But the guy who plays Koga has got to be a great actor because Koga is so taciturn. The actor that I've seen him out of character just looks very happy and kind of dorky.
And got his start, oddly enough, in the Prince of Tennis musical.
Yes.
Yeah.
Many did.
And along with
Another thing that makes it pretty clear these actors enjoy themselves a lot, they also had a band briefly after the first series, and they did image songs just on their own for the
Like
various
all the main characters just singing together as a band.
Ray's actor is also a lead singer for another band, but Jam Project did the opening theme, and they're a very interesting band. They're actually kind of a group that comes together periodically to do opening themes and really epic stuff.
Any questions, any comments?
Where did you get that file?
I don't remember.
It was, I believe
It was part of TV New
part of
Homes.
TV Nihon's package, so
Yeah.
if you download their package, you'll get,
It's a wonderful.
it's so much fun
I
to
highly
watch
recommend.
that.
So it's like everything Garo completely stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every
So
season
far.
is alter a bit of Garo. So.
Josh watching.
No way, it's so
Okay,
good.
is there, like,
First season
First
is
season is 25?
24, I think.
24?
Second season is 13, I believe.
No.
No way.
Second season is 25.
It's
yeah.
25?
Yeah. And the Black Blood is only 6. The various movies and OVAs you can find, and then I don't believe we've had a confirmed episode number for season 3.
I think it's
You mean season
Or,
4?
or sorry, season 3.
Okay.
I forget season 3 is Garo. I'm sorry.
Good, I promise you.
It's not because we hate it, because we do still like it.
I enjoyed it. I'm glad we watched
It's
it.
different.
It's got very different
It's
feels.
not quite as Garo as Garo.
I forget Hibiki is a common writer, and I adore Hibiki. So by forgetting something belongs to a franchise does not mean it's
Also,
not.
it's,
Sure is
I've got a theory about the episode with all the horror movies in Mackay Flower. Pretty sure one of the zombies in one of the scenes is Amamiya himself.
Yes.
Pretty sure.
Yeah.
Also, for the first season, there's a hilarious bonus episode that's like this weird crack stage show that has stuff like the voice actors for The Ring Zauberba and Ray's Necklace Silva, like drinking tea together and talking about things, and it also has
Yes, you have. That was with Mark Musashi talking about how he's not a Shinkansen.
Yes, and one of the characters in the first season that we didn't touch upon, he is an assistant to the Watchdogs, is played by Mark Musashi, and his name is Kodama. And Mark Musashi is another bilingual English and Japanese, and
He
has
bounces
this
back and forth between the States and Japan
really
constantly.
crazy sounding rant in English during that bonus episode about how his name might be Kodama, but that doesn't mean that he's a Shinkansen.
Oh,
Because bad puns are wonderful.
Yeah, because the Shinkansen, the super fast trains, has the Kodama line. Yeah.
I got that one.
It's a fun episode. It's a
weird.
real.
Does it get also really creepy, like hitting, not in a bad way, but isn't there someone like hitting on Kaoru or someone doing this really weird interpretation of Koga? Vague memories.
I know Sylva's being even more overprotective of Ray than usual.
It's pretty
Yeah.
crazy humor.
Yeah, it looks like this.
So, looks
We've
like
got
we've
4
got-
minutes for the next
Time for
round,
next
so
round.
it's
Thank you for joining
thanks
us.
so much.